I am Christin Marin-Taylor. I'm actually the chair of the LEAP committee, and we are super excited to bring these panelists to you because this is like secrets that they're going to unveil that we know nothing about. So very exciting. So I would love to introduce our speakers. The first speaker is going to be Brandon Talley, a certified residential appraiser. Brandon began his career in 2005 and has been a certified residential appraiser since 2010, so like forever. This includes appraising the Albuquerque and Rio Rancho area. He also goes as far south as Belen and as far east as Estancia and as far north as Santa Fe. So he's going around. All right, and our next panelist, it is Tego Venturi. You might know him. He is a realtor, and guess what I learned? You probably know this, but the appraisers are realtors too. I didn't know. All right, and so he is also the co-founder of the Venturi Real Estate Group, Realty Group. He has over 4,000 home buyers and sellers served. Oh, he doesn't want me to go through that, okay. He's also the Greater Albuquerque, the Realtor of the Year in 2024, in case you didn't know that. All right, that was. Oh, there we go. All right. Well, now you can read it, okay? So he is the expert on MLS, the systems, rules, policy. He's the host of the Albuquerque Real Estate Talk, over 500 episodes since 2014. Regular speaker and educator on housing market trends, which we all see, right? Like he posts those really interesting statistics. I'm always like, I better zoom in. So he does a great job. And of course, he's a passionate advocate for housing affordability and home ownership. So thank you for being here. And then Randy Pratt. You probably didn't know this, but prior to becoming an appraiser, Randy was in the Air Force, retiring as a lieutenant colonel. He has 1,900 hours of flight time as an instructor, navigator, and weapons officer in an F-111 and a B-1 aircraft, including 100 hours of combat flight time over Iraq in Desert Storm. After finishing his flying career, he was the commander of the personnel squadron for a year, and then the commander of the logistics squadron for 2.5 years before retiring. He began training as an appraiser in 2015 with Bonzel, if we all remember her, Bonzel Henry, and Michael Hamilton. Randy has been a certified residential appraiser since April of 2019, and he had to do it the hard way with the 2,500 hours of apprenticing, which is insane. Like, who does that? It's lowered now. Okay, because we're running out of appraisers. So we need them. Okay, so since April of 2019, and he's been the chair of the appraiser committee at GAR since 2020. He is qualified as an FHA appraiser and has conducted VA appraisals during training. So thank you, panelists, for being here, and Brandon's going to take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm Brandon. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of market value versus appraised value. It's one of the bigger misconceptions. Market value is the price a home is most likely to bring in an open market. That's with a seller and buyer agreeing to the price. The appraised value is going to be the value that we as appraisers determine based on data and analysis. So the best way to look at it as market value is going to be objective, market value is going to be subjective, where appraised value is going to be objective. So we're looking at the property in different ways, not what someone is willing to pay for it, not what the market, may determine something as being worth more. We're looking at the data itself. So if I'm comparing two homes together that they're the same size home, one has a 3-car garage, one has a 2-car garage, I'm looking at the differences in between the values. So the appraised value and market value are similar, that they're values, but other than that, they are very different. Market value is what someone's willing to pay for it on an open market. Appraised value is what the data tells us it's worth. So there are going to be times when we come in above a sales price, when we come in below a sales price, and then there's going to be many times where we're right at around the sales price. But we're determining it strictly off of what the data from that specific market area is telling us. Second, I'm going to talk to you about the appraisal process, the fun part. So the appraisal process begins with us receiving the order. We get the order from the lender. Generally, they give us anywhere from 4 to 5 business days to complete the order. Once we get that, generally they give us 24 hours to schedule the appraisal through you or the showing time, anything like that, whatever is the best contact for scheduling. Once we schedule it, the day of appointment, we have to pull all of our data. We have to take all of our comparable pictures. We're looking at everything as of that date because that is our effective date. So generally, I start that morning by pulling all of my comparables for all of my appointments that day before even going out to see the home. Once I have all of that, I go to my appointment and I complete the observation. It's actually not an inspection. We have to be careful. We're not allowed to call it an inspection anymore because we're not home inspectors. So we have to call it an observation. And get to the house generally, pull up, like to look at the house from my vehicle before I even get out and go knock on the door or use the lockbox, anything like that. Some important things to know that when we get to the home, if it's an occupied residence, it's best to let us know if we're gonna be having to use a lockbox, because if we get there and no one's there to let us in, we have to call you to make sure that it's okay that we access the lockbox before going into the home. So if you put in if we schedule it through showing time, if you send us a quick little message, hey, no one's gonna be there to let you in, just use the super box, or if it's a lockbox, whatever it is, let us know. Then we're gonna make our way around the entire exterior of the house, taking pictures and notes. We're looking at the condition, the materials, is it stucco, is it wood siding, is it brick, all of those little things that we're looking at. We're looking at the condition of the roof, if it's a pitched roof. If it's a flat roof, we're not allowed to go on roofs anymore, so we can't go on the roof to look. So we're depending on what you put in the MLS or what you tell us. So that's why it's important to let us know whether it's a flat roof, or if it's, if it's a flat roof, is it TPO, is it tar and gravel, is it rubber membrane, all those little things, because that's what we're basing our information on. And if it's FHA, we're looking at every little detail. Is it peeling paint on the exterior? Are there missing window screens? Is there broken windows? Is there, signs of leaking or anything like that? We're looking at all those little things on the exterior. Also on the exterior, if there's any storage sheds or outbuildings, we have to measure those and include photos of the exterior and interior of those. So if there's a lock on there, make sure your sellers or you leave us a key or unlock it so that way we can access it, because otherwise we're gonna have to go back because we have to include a picture of any outbuildings as well.
Is that just FHA, sorry?
Generally, in my case, I found all lenders pretty much require interior and exterior photos of storage sheds, any outbuildings, things like that. We have to be able to access them and take a photo. FHA 100% requires it. I found that most lenders also want it in the appraisal because they want to see what's inside, type of materials, anything like that. They don't care about lawn mowers or anything like that. They just want to know the materials and the condition of the interior of that shed. Then we're going to work our way inside, taking photos and notes of all interior, including materials. Is it vinyl plank flooring, tile flooring, carpet, the condition of it, how long ago was it updated? That's why if you meet us at the house or you leave a packet for us on the counter, the most important thing you can leave us is an update list or a features list of all the little things that the owner or the seller has done to the home over the years. Oh, I'll let you handle that. I'm not very good with the slide. I just keep talking. But we're looking at all those little things. We're looking, does it have smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors? If it's FHA, they 100% require smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors in the home. And so those have to be in there when we do the appraisal. Otherwise, we have to make a second trip to the home. We're looking at the water heater. Is is the water heater in good condition? Is it a tankless water heater? We're looking at the heating source. If it's electric baseboard heating, are they plug-in or are they hardwired in? Because if they're plug-in, they don't actually meet the code for a permanent heat source. We're looking at fireplaces, all those little things. We're looking at everything because it all matters when determining our adjustments. And so we work our way room by room, looking at the materials, the condition, all the little amenities that have been done. Has there been new light fixtures put in? You know, have the windows been updated? Does the house have new paint? Is it crown molding on the ceiling? Do they have plaster walls? Any of those things. We're looking at every little piece of that house because it could matter when we're making adjustments in the market. Once we complete the observation, which generally takes, if it's, an average size home, 3,000 or less square feet, around 30 to 45 minutes, depending on if it's conventional or FHA. If it's FHA, if it has a crawl space, we have to go into that. We have to stick our heads into the crawl space and take a photo. It's called a head and shoulder inspection or observation. If it's an attic, we have to be able to access the attic. If there's a drop stair, we'll use the stairs. If there's not, we carry little ladders with us that we pop our heads in and snap a photo to show that, yes, the attic is there. It doesn't look like it's falling down. Or, if there's visual evidence that maybe there's some rotting wood in the attic or in the crawl space, those are all things that we're looking for. And in that case, we call for a structural engineer to come inspect the home, or if maybe it's a different type of inspection that we've got to actually call for in the appraisal. All those things are things that we're looking at while we're going through the house. If it's FHA, we have to turn on all the appliances and make sure the appliances work, because they don't all have to be installed, such as a dishwasher or anything like that, but if they're there, they are required to work. We're some of the nosiest people out there because we have to go through every little piece of that house and make sure that there's nothing that we're missing. I had one the other day where they tried covering some of the flooring with a big rug. Come to find out the subfloor was rotting away, and it's a good thing I pulled that rug up, because that can create an issue for us. I mean, it creates an issue for us, it creates an issue for the buyer, for the seller, for all of you. So that's why we go through it all so much. And we want to make sure that we're putting forth the best product out there as far as appraised value goes. Because our number one job as appraisers is to make sure that the lender is not lending more than what the home is worth. It's not to make sure that it's current with market values, it's to make sure that the lender is not lending more than what the house is worth itself. So once we finish the observation, then we get to go do the fun part and look at 20 to 30 sales, determining what adjustments should be made or what adjustments the market's not showing are worth being made. If we find we have a house that is located on a 6,000 square foot lot, and this house, one of our comps, is located on a 5,000 square foot lot, maybe the market shows that there's no adjustment made, that it's not worth adjusting for that. So the report itself generally takes anywhere from 3 to 5 hours to write, depending on the difficulty of the appraisal, the location of the appraisal, all those little factors. I can spend 2 hours plus sometimes determining just the adjustments that I have to make, not writing the report itself. And by the time we're done, our reports are 50 to 60 pages these days, and they're not getting any shorter. So that's pretty much the appraisal process. It's generally a week process. Once you see the home, most appraisers, I think, write their appraisals within 1 to 2 business days of seeing it. That way it gets out in a timely manner. That way the house itself is still fresh in our head. While we have the photos and all of our notes, just like everything else, it's always best if it's fresh in our head and we can picture it in our head. So most of the time, it takes about a week to write an appraisal once we get it. So my suggestion, if you're on a tight timeline, if your buyers are locked into an interest rate, your seller's trying to get the house closed quicker, make sure you tell the lender, get the appraisal as fast as possible. And I know everyone likes to wait on the appraisal because they want to make sure everything else is going to be good before the appraisal's ordered. That way we're not spending, I don't even know how much they always charge these days, $600+ for an appraisal. You always want to make sure that everything else good.
I got to bring something up.
Yeah.
You said you don't know how much you're getting
No.
charged for appraisers. Can you
So,
dig into that?
so if we work with an appraisal management company, they charge a specific fee. And while we're in New Mexico, that AMC has to tell us how much they're charging the buyer or the seller, whoever's paying for the appraisal. They have to let them know how much they're charging, and they have to tell us. So I see it in most cases. I shouldn't say I don't know, because AMCs have to inform us, and we have to put it on the appraisal itself. Let's say I'm charging, for my portion is $450, $475 for the appraisal, and I see that the AMC charged the client a total of $700. Well, then I know that they charged, $225 for their portion of the appraisal. And that's where you're seeing a lot of the costs go up in these appraisals, is these appraisal management companies. They have to take their portion. They're intermediary in the process. So it's the appraisal prices have gone up. But they are $600 to $700. I see sometimes even $800. And I've seen some companies where they have a flat fee that they charge. Some charge depending on how much they're paying the appraiser. They want to take their portion. If they're paying the appraiser more, well, they want to make more. So it just depends. We don't determine the price of an appraisal. Just we either accept the order or we don't. So that's pretty much the appraisal process. Hopefully you didn't get too bored with that. I know the appraisal process isn't the funnest thing, but it is. It can be.
We're going to have lots of times for Q&A, so write your questions down, and I know you're going to have a lot about adjustments, you guys, so.
Yes. So I'm going to pass the mic to Vigo and let him go.
All right. I'm going to stand up because then you can see it. Okay, let's talk about, so I was asked to talk about the MLS and how the MLS plays into this whole valuation thing in our world. And since I know a little bit about the MLS, I thought, yeah, I can do that. So let's just start here, the why. When you're entering a listing, your listing that you're putting in is now becoming a permanent record for the housing market. And so today's listing is tomorrow's comp, right? And in an appraisal is only as good as the data behind it. So it's up to us working in a cooperative, which the MLS is, to provide good data. The appraisers rely on the data. We rely on the appraisals, or excuse me, the data for doing our CMAs. But think about this also. The policymakers, they rely on our data. The people making decisions on housing policy in New Mexico and Albuquerque rely on that data. We are the source of truth for all housing data in New Mexico, and of course, central New Mexico in particular. So it really does matter a lot. Bam, just like that. Okay. And so I just want to talk about this quick before we go much deeper. So what is the MLS? Again, MLS is a cooperative, meaning we all cooperate, we provide information, we use that information. So it goes both ways. There's a reason we have this clear cooperation policy, and we can go down the rabbit hole on, if it's good or bad. But the idea is to capture every sale, capture every listing, give fair market participation for every listing. That's what clear cooperation is all about, so everybody knows that a property is available. It's not really a platform. We think of it as a marketing platform. We think of it as, I put it in there and it syndicates out to all these 1,000 websites. That's fine, but really it's a platform to make the market work. It makes the housing market work, and we all have to participate to make it work. Okay, what do appraisers need from the MLS? They need good data. They don't need fluff. They want accurate data. Every field you skip with, like if you know the information, you don't provide the information, now they got to guess. So if you know that the roof was replaced 2 years ago, put that out there. But don't exaggerate either. We'll get to that in a sec. Describe the features, materials, the what? Never. What did Tucker call it back at real estate school? Puffing? Accurate and defined square footage, high quality photos, floor plans, we'll talk about that. Clear notes. Maybe you don't want to put it out public, but put it into LOSO comments. And then concessions, and we'll get into that. All right. Be descriptive. So say quartz countertops instead of remodeled kitchen or updated kitchen. What does updated kitchen mean? Be descriptive. Give the details. Again, these guys are going to look at, and I don't know, Tom, you can confirm this too, is you guys look at the data before you actually go out to the property in most cases. So the more information you can give them up front, the better for them. Also for us, when we're doing CMAs, we don't go and visit the property. We have to rely on exactly what's in the MLS to be able to do that CMA that we're working on for our seller. So they can't adjust to what they don't know. Generic descriptions, get generic appraisals. And then think about this. Think like an appraiser. Think about like if you're doing a CMA in the future. What would I want to know about this property to help me justify the value? Accuracy. Let's talk about MLS accuracy. Is Josiah in the room? Yeah, yeah, no bright pink shirt here. Accuracy matters a lot. Don't exaggerate and don't guess. If you don't know, you don't know. Now, we have certain fields that are required. Square footage. I'm sorry, living area. It's not square footage any longer. It's now called living area. I know everybody, like, there he is. Oh. We were talking about accurate data in the MLS, so, yeah. So, it becomes part of the permanent record, like I said earlier, but don't guess. So, square footage is, living area is a required field. Your built is now a required field. We didn't used to. We added that last year. There's certain things. So if you don't know, go find it out and put it in there. It matters a lot. Be specific. I know I'll give you one example of something that went bad. A few years ago on our team, we had a listing. Every home in the neighborhood had an RV park next to it. And we listed the home and said it's got RV parking, big RV pad right next to the house, RV hookup, everything. Well, after closing, the buyer reads the CC&R. Turns out RV parking is not allowed in that neighborhood, even though everybody was doing it. Now, you can make an argument that, yeah, that's obviously null and void because everybody was ignoring it. But yeah, you need to make sure. Don't put something in there if you're just guessing. Photos. Photos are super helpful. Again, we all know that when we're doing CMAs. You're trying to do a CMA and you go back and there's like some kind of crummy cell phone photos and there's not very many of them and it doesn't really give a whole lot of details. How can you judge the condition of a property if you don't have good photos? Now, a couple of years ago, the MLS board, we added the requirement that you must have a living room, a kitchen, all bathrooms, exterior front, and exterior back. Those are required in our MLS. There is an exception to that, and that's only with written documentation from the seller that they don't want it in there. And we're going to talk about that more in a second for a reason. But really, if you're marketing the property, we all know, we all use professional photographers these days mostly, and good photos matter a lot. Label special features in the photos if you can. If there's views, if there's, a tankless hot water heater, you might just say, yeah, tankless hot water heater. Of course, these guys can look at the photo and say it's a tankless hot water heater, but label them as well. And if you have a floor plan, do it. I mean, again, these days, it's so simple with the photography guys, with Matterport and iGuide and all these technology that can do these floor plans. They're not going to rely on that, though, for their square footage. You guys still have to go out. You still have to measure the house. But it gives them the basic layout of the property before they actually get there. So floor plans are helpful. Now, you guys know New Mexico MLS, which is the MLS that's kind of a bunch of small little markets all around the state, they are requiring floor plans. And our board is kind of looking at that here, but that's a side note. All right, living area versus GLA. These guys use something called gross living area. we use something called living area, AKA square footage. So what is it? Living area is all finished heated square space or square footage. It could be in a basement. It could be in a casita that's detached from the property. All of that counts as living area for our purposes in the MLS. So you can put the total number. Now you might want to say the casita is 550 square feet included in the square footage, please, yes. But when you get the appraisal back, I had one years ago. It was a split level house. So you go in, you go up, and you go down, right? Very few of those in Albuquerque, but there are a few. And all the bedrooms were on that lower level. And there were 2 bathrooms down, there were 4 bedrooms down, there was 1 bathroom up. When I got the appraisal on the first line, it said, no bedroom, 1 bathroom house. Because GLA, right? I got that right? Okay, so GLA doesn't count it, so it's still there in total living area, but they just have to split it out. So if you can be more detailed when you're putting that information is, again, you know, it's 3,300 square feet, there's a 600 square foot casita, and there's, let's say whatever, 1,000 square feet that's below grade, right? Would that be the way to do it? Okay. Seller concessions. Okay. Here's the crux of the biscuit, as they say. What is and what is not a seller concession? And I've got a slide that'll go through this, but a seller concession is a cost the seller pays on behalf of the buyer that reduces the buyer's out-of-pocket costs. We need to document these. We have a field when we close the listing that says seller concessions. And it's not a gift, it actually affects value. So I put this together, just kind of a quick summary here. So if it lowers the cost to the buyer, it's a concession. If it doesn't, it's not. So here's some examples of a seller concession. Seller paid closing costs, right? That's obvious. A rate buy down, again, that's a closing cost, right? Repair credit. A repair credit to the buyer is considered a concession, but not a price reduction. Prepaid taxes and insurance, let's say, or maybe they're prepaying the HOA for a year. We've done that before for, you know, some deals. But what is not a concession, and this is the big one, a buyer agent commission paid by the seller is not a concession, with the caveat in most cases. It depends, right, guys? That's the appraiser's favorite word. It depends. Personal property obviously is not considered a concession. Already completed repairs are not a concession. However, a credit for repairs is a concession. Any lender in here? Steve, have I said anything wrong yet? No, okay, just making sure. I know, we got Steve, we got Christine. Any other lenders in here? Yeah, there we go, okay. So, and you guys call them IPCs, right? Interested party contributions. Same thing, okay? And I put on here marketing incentives, just that would be like a bonus to the buyer broker or something like that. For seller concessions to be considered for appraisers, they must appear on the settlement statement as a credit to the buyer and a debit to the seller. Do we have any title people in here? All right, just hit this real quick here. So again, buyer agent commission is not a seller concession. And this was, obviously after everything that went down last year, all that fun we went through. Basically, it's usually not considered a concession. If it's non-customary, then it could be. So in that last line there, it says post-2024 NAR settlement changes made buyer agent commissions a point of negotiation. While not typically a concession, appraisers may scrutinize non-customary commission structures that appear to manipulate the sale price. So they've got discretion. You like that definition? Does that work? You good with that? Okay, good. ChatGPT is amazing. So how do you document commissions? So seller concession, yes. Is that a good answer? No, you need to say more than just, yes, there was a seller concession. You need to say, $5,000 to buyer closing costs or whatever it is, right? And yeah, I made that point. Okay, and then just one last thing I want to hit here is we do have the option to enter what we call a comp-only listing. So a comp-only listing is, or a sale, I should say, it's not really a listing, but I guess we enter it as a listing first and we close it, right? Is that right? Yeah, okay. So let's say, whatever, you're involved in a deal, it never hits the MLS, it's a friend or whatever, and you're involved. We've all seen those deals, right? Well, we really want to capture that data. We want to capture that sale even though it never really went through the MLS. So we do have the option for what's called a comp-only listing. The catch is you do need written permission from both the buyer and the seller. And it does require all the same fields that are required in any other listing. Just the caveat I want to put on that though is photos are still required. The 6 required photos are still required. However, you could, if the seller doesn't want the photos listed or doesn't want you taking photos or the buyer doesn't want you having photos, you could get a letter from the seller saying, I don't want the photos listed. That way at least we capture the sale and capture the data, not necessarily with the photos. Obviously photos are still preferable, but if you can't, you can't. So anyway, we do have that in there, and I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And so, in summary, the MLS is a cooperative. We work together. Accurate data helps everyone, buyers, sellers, appraisers, brokers, and policymakers. Don't forget that, because we got some policymaker problems in the housing world right now, but we're not going to go there. Be specific, be honest, be accurate. Don't fluff, give the truth. Go find the facts if you don't know. Use high-quality visuals and floor plans if you have them. Report concessions clearly, and then capture MLS, off MLS sales if you have that information. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm Randy Pratt. I've been the chair of the Appraisers Committee since 2020, as it said in the early slide. That's because nobody else wants to do it. Appraisers, we're members of GAR. We are realtors, just like all of you. We are part of the same team. A couple of things that were mentioned earlier is, yes, we do, we can see what is being done because we see the contract for the subject, but we don't know any of that information about the comps. We're going to go to the subject, we're going to see what the condition of it is. We don't see that in very many of the comps. Occasionally we'll get to use a comp that we had actually done the appraisal for on the sale. We go, okay, I've got real data, but we have to use what's in there as living area, what's in the MLS for the comparable sales. Couple of things that that I have heard. That the appraisers don't want any information from you. That's not true. I will take any information you want to give to me, and every other appraiser should. I have heard that appraisers have said, no, you as a real estate agent shouldn't be at the home when we come in. The homeowner shouldn't be there. It's their house. Let them be there. You're always welcome when I'm coming doing an appraisal because you're interested in what we do. We have to do what we have to do, but it doesn't bother me if there's anybody else there. So you're welcome. Your seller is welcome. Please put the information in the MLS. As Tego was saying, we have those comp onlys. I can't use them as a comp if you don't give me any information. So, I mean, we have photos. Vinyl plank flooring can look like tile, can look like wood, and you can't really tell in the photo what it is. So please tell us. The more information you put in there, the better. Sometimes we have to call and ask questions because the information in the MLS is not as good as we would have liked it to have been. I know the roof's flat. Is it TPO? Is it tar and gravel? So we put our slides together last week. So here's some things that I found Monday and Tuesday of this week. Living area, 1,330 square feet. Public remarks, welcome to your new home. The charming property boasts 1,211 square feet of living space. Which is it? What square footage do I use? $10,000 concession amount. They did put in comments, $10,000 in concessions came off the sales price of the home. We went under contract for $14,000 less than it was listed.
So a price reduction is not a concession, right? That's what you're getting at.
Correct. So typically what we do is we see those seller concessions and we go, okay, here's the sales price. Seller's concession is a minus on that comp because that's what they really sold the house for. So when you put in the seller concessions, think about it. When this is a comp for your next sale in the same neighborhood, what price do you want me to use? So here's another one I had to call on. Listed for $975,000. Concession amount $30,447. Comments, buyer is a licensed realtor. Price was reduced in lieu of paying the buyer's broker commission and gross receipts tax. Okay. So it's sold for $943 and a $30,000 commission. So am I using $913? Okay, if it hadn't been a real estate broker buying the house, it would have effectively been a $975,000 sale. Okay, that's a $60,000 difference in my comp. What do you want me to use? So think about it, because everything that's in there, we will know what it is on the subject. So yeah, I end up calling the real estate agent, both the buyer and the seller, and I got the right information so I could appropriately use it. But then I don't have to chase you down to get the information. And of course, it delays getting the appraisal turned in until I can get the information. Okay, we love floor plans. Yes, we look at it for the one that we're going out to, but it might be our best information on that comparable sale because we don't go to those. We have to measure the home anyway. As long as we want to keep our license, we have to actually measure it ourselves. So we can see what is the basement. And the ANSI definition of basement, if any part of the level is below ground. So, yeah, I've been out to a house, it was a new construction. You walk up to the front door and there's 3 steps down to the house. Upstairs was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. It was a 700 square foot, 1-bedroom, 1-bath house with a 2,600 square foot basement. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, living, dining, kitchen. It all counts. It's all living area. Go ahead and tell us what the full living area is. We have to put the GLA ANSI standards on one line. Everything else, it goes on its own line. It all counts. We just have to list it separately, whether it's a basement, an ADU. We know your clients want to know what the total living area is. So do we, because I don't want to use a 600 square foot house as a comp for that one with the 700 square foot GLA and a 2,600 square foot basement because it's not going to be the same buyer. So I want to know the total living area. But as Tego said, tell us that it's a 500 square foot ADU. Because if you just say it has an ADU and you don't have a floor plan, I don't know what size the ADU is. It's got to go on a separate line, but I don't know how to separate it out. Provide all the information about solar. Is it seller owned? Is it paid off seller owned? Is it seller owned, but it's under a separate loan? Depending on, I've seen different rules. FHA has said, if it's under a separate loan, I can't count it. I've seen some AMCs and the engagement letter says, oh, you can count it if it's paid off or if it's under a separate loan. You know, the buyer may be refinancing and they're gonna put it all under the same loan. Well, then, yeah, I'm gonna count it as seller owned. If it's third party owned, we can't use it at all. What is the size of the system? Again, we go out to the subject and we're gonna look at the solar information and see how big it is. If you don't put it in the MLS, I don't know the size of the system on the comps. Tell us about updates.
I gotta ask this question.
It depends.
Got me. How much value does a leased solar voltaic system add to the
At
home?
least nothing, because you don't own it. It's not theirs. It counts for nothing. Tell us about the updates. We see the subject. We don't see the comps, and the photos can be misleading. You know, it might look like it's a wood floor and it's vinyl. It might look like tile. They make the vinyl look like tile, and they're not the same. You know, tell us whether it's quartz or granite. And now we have time for, if anybody has any questions.
We've got a
So-
mic up front here. Why don't you guys kind of just come up so everybody can hear?
Okay,
So here I am. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We placed a microphone right in the center of the room, so feel free to walk up. This is all about Q&A because you've got these experts, so come on up.
Okay, and one of the things that I was gonna mention earlier when Brandon was talking about, I don't know how much an appraisal costs. He knows how much the cost is for the one that he's doing. We are legally not allowed to, as appraisers, get together and go, here's what we wanna charge. So I may charge something different than Brandon. I may not charge the same for every house I go to because some of them are a rush and I need it in 2 days. Well, now I've got to rearrange my schedule, so there's a cost to that.
Speaking of costs, let's not talk about commissions, please. Let's not go there in the sense of what we charge and all that stuff, because we all charge what we charge, remember? There's no standard commission.
Thank you for that. You ready for my question?
We
Okay.
are.
So I took all your information starting with you. You don't go on flat roofs. Neither do I anymore. All right. So I deal in a lot of estate sales because it seems like being in business 50 years, my customers are dying. So that's the key to success. Outlive your customers. So dealing with estate sales, we don't know materials. We don't know what the roof is. Are you using drone? I'm going to put a big question. Are you using drone yet to check the roofs out? That's number one. Number two, going to the granite countertops or quartz countertops, who knows? I go in there, it's shiny. I don't know what it is. These are kind of things that you're asking us to fill in, and I'm having a little challenge in doing that.
So as far as the quartz countertops versus granite countertops, one of my tests that I do is I rub the underneath of the countertop. If it's smooth and not rough at all, it tells me it's going to be quartz. If it's got a rougher feel to it, 99% of the time, it's going to be granite. So I'm doing those little tests when I go through a house, and there's little things you can do to find out whether it's quartz or granite. As far as the roof, no, I don't do drones. I don't go on the roof. You know,
I can go to Google and look at the overview,
Well,
and I can
yeah.
see.
Oh, you can
To
do
some
that from
extent.
Google, I guess, huh?
yes, so we can go on there and we can see, but that means, you know, we're chancing that the information that Google has on there is recent enough to give us the most accurate.
The only reason I think of drones because I've had a lot of properties with panels, and that's what the insurance companies are doing now. They're doing all drones on that roof, whether it's single or two-story. So those are my questions. Thank you very much. And keeping us in.
And like Tego said, don't make it up. If you don't know, you don't know. So don't put in something that you're not aware of. We're just saying, give us as much information as you can with knowledge.
Let me just, Kirsten, let me just say something about that. What you put in the MLS, when you're entering your listing, you own that. That is you, right, Jolene? You were on the swimless board for how many years? So it's yours. Again, you can't say, oh, the square footage is an estimate. No, that's not a get out of jail free card. What you put in there is what you put in there, so. Yeah, Jolene said, that's what the seller said. Well, okay, that's fine, but you still own it.
Thanks for the info today. This has been really helpful. I have a timely question. I'm closing out a listing today, and I've never had this happen before. The buyer offered the seller a $50,000 closing cost credit. Where do I put that so that it would be effective for you? Because the comp in this particular neighborhood really matters, and I don't know how to get your attention on it. Do you always read the remarks?
Always.
100%.
And so perhaps putting it in the remarks would be the place to put it for you?
Yes, because it's not a concession. Because a concession is the seller helping the buyer, not the other way around. But yeah, put the information in there in the remarks so that we can see it.
The LOSO remarks, that section is perfect for that because we do read it. We look through every little detail of that MLS sheet.
This is a new approach coming from back east. I don't know if they're trying to keep the property taxes low or what, but it was an interesting approach and the seller was happy to take it. Second question, does it matter to you if the seller paid compensation to a buyer broker? Do you want that put somewhere? Does it matter to you?
It does not matter. As an appraiser, it does not matter whether they paid, the buyer broker commission. Even when we're doing ours, I see it sometimes in the addendum, sometimes I see it in a counteroffer, I see it in all those different things, but ultimately that doesn't affect the value. So I generally don't even mention it in my appraisal.
Guess the newspapers were wrong last summer, huh? On the television. Thank you.
And just a side note on that, who other swimless directors do we have in here, or former? MLS would rather not have anything about compensation in the MLS, basically. We had a long debate about it, and, oh, you weren't on last year. Oh, my gosh. And just decided not to have compensation even after closing in the MLS because of all the liability.
Yeah, like Brandon said, we don't really use it because we're seeing contracts, because we're supposed to analyze the contract as part of the appraisal. So what I am seeing for the most part is not much change. So
I agree.
So we're not doing anything different because nothing is really changing. If we were seeing a big change in how buyer brokers were being paid, then we would look at that as something to go in. But
in a comp-rich environment, how do you pick your comps? In a comp-rich environment, how do you select your comps?
I'm looking for the most comparable. I'm looking for which one is most similar in size, similar conditions, similar materials. It's like if you go into a tract home neighborhood and, the same builder has built all of the homes and you have 4 of the same layouts as one another, but this one has, your subject property has Formica countertops, vinyl flooring, carpet flooring, fiberglass in the showers, and 3 of the other ones have the same thing. And then this one that sold for more than the rest has granite countertops in the kitchen or tile in the showers. It's got an updated tankless water heater, things like that. Well, I'm going to use those other 3 that are more similar. So in a comp-rich environment, I'm narrowing it down. Well, it's great because it gives me many comps to work with. I still want the most similar. The ones that are going to require the least amount of adjustments, the most recent sales. Most lenders nowadays want at least 2 comps within 90 days. As we all know, that can be difficult sometimes. But I'm looking for the ones that are going to be most similar to my subject, whether they're all built by the same builder or whatever it may be. I want the ones where, it may involve me putting 12 comps into my report and then narrowing it down to 5 that are the most similar. So I'm going to be looking at the most similar. That's the best way to put it, is I'm looking for the most similar, the ones that's going to require the least amount of adjustments.
The least amount of adjustments, the least amount of explaining.
Yes.
You know, we want it to be very obvious to the people who are reading the report that this is why we picked those. So, well, we want to find 3 homes that sold in the last 90 days that are all exactly like the subject. Doesn't happen, but, you know, it's preferable.
You never know.
Do you guys ever include pending deals?
Yes.
Yes. Usually include 1 to 2 pending or 1 to 2 active listings. I at least want 1 pending, 1 active in my report. Most lenders that I work with anyways require 1 pending, 1 active as well. So in most of my appraisals, I have a minimum of 5 comps, 3 closed and at least 1 pending, 1 active.
But, you know, as we've seen at different times in the market, you know, especially, you know, 3 years ago, that listing price and pending price changes at closing. So I typically don't provide as much weight to the active and pending sale because I don't know what the actual final value is going to be.
Real quick, I would like to add in that when there are significant adjustments, the lender really will have a problem and they will come back to the appraiser and say, you need more comps or ditch these comps. These are clearly not comparable. They even have threshold percentages that they're looking at for the amount of adjustments. So it's rough on them.
And if I'm correct, that's 10% line, 15% net, and 25% gross.
Yes.
So those are all things that we're trying to stay within when we're making our adjustments, and those are things we take into consideration when we're pulling comparable sales.
I'm seeing and hearing a lot of things about how AI could possibly be shaping the future of appraisals, and from Tego's perspective and the appraisals perspective, what are you guys hearing? I mean, obviously, like Rocket has acquired Redfin and Mr. Cooper. So how is that going to affect our appraisers going to be obsolete in the future? And is everything going to be done via the AI models? Question.
I've got the answer. The AI can't smell the cat. That also goes for that thing that starts with a Z.
Yeah, just curious.
Well, and I think, Christine, that's maybe more on you.
Yeah, so there is actually this massive database that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have where they collect all provided appraisal data. And something that becomes an issue, because it is a form of AI that they're using, will be, well, this listing agent said this house was this much square foot, and then this listing agent, or it just sold on this appraisal at this much square footage, and then now we have a problem. So AI can't solve those problems because they're not walking into the home doing the physical measurement. They're not smelling the cat. So there's an adjustment for that. But there are other things that are going on where, you know, they're trying to make sure that appraisals are fair. But I would just say that, no, AI is not coming in and taking over.
It's there, and it's going to be there, and it's going to continue to be there without a doubt. And they're getting more advanced, and the algorithm's getting better all the time with the AI. Talk about what's it called when basically the DU says, no, you don't need an appraisal because, what's that called?
That's an appraisal waiver.
Appraisal waiver. So talk about that. Sorry, guys, that means you guys are out of business.
I don't know. That's some weird form of magic because it doesn't always work. It's really interesting. So sometimes it'll just give you a waiver when you run it through because maybe they have enough money in the deal that it's accepting the value because it doesn't really matter. Sometimes maybe they're just really listing it under the value that the automated system is using. They have valuation models that are running in the background that are using comps that we don't necessarily understand why they're using them, because you can get a report and it'll say, oh, okay, but the problem is an appraiser has not been out there, not necessarily on, they're called AVMs. So sometimes you will get an automated, approval with no appraisal required for one buyer on the same house that you will not get on somebody else, depending on, the buyer.
Well, Zillow was using those AVM models and they were buying houses and flipping them and they lost so much money that they stopped. So
Yeah, we don't love them.
on a tract home, it might be easier to use that AVM model, but you know, we have a lot of unique homes. Okay, you go into an area where the homes are 80 years old. Some of them feel like they're 80 years old, and some of them have been completely remodeled. I'm not sure how AI is always going to know the answer to that.
Okay, regarding cooling, evaporative is probably going to be valued less than refrigerated, right? But I'm seeing that we have options on the MLS to select various things for a refrigerated house, for instance. Like we can say central air, but if refrigerated is not checked, that doesn't necessarily convey that it's refrigerated. Maybe the same for like ductless type stuff too. But how do you guys determine? I mean, do you guys dig deeper? Like, let's say it just says central air, and you can have central evaporative, of course, but like to determine that refrigerated versus evaporative component.
So what I generally do is first I look through the photos. If I can see, you know, if there's an aerial photo or a side photo of the house, anything like that that shows if it's a refrigerated air unit or it's an evaporative cooler, or if maybe it's mini splits. So first I like to look through the photos, see if I can see in there, you know, what type of unit it is. If I can't, I look through the notes. You know, did the listing agent put in there that it's refrigerated air, or did they put that, you know, the house has mini splits or it's evaporative cooling? If I can't find it anywhere, then I'm calling you next to ask you what type of cooling system does it have in there. Because, and generally I like to go through a house or through a comp and get all of those questions together and then call the listing agent and ask them the 5 or 6 questions I'm probably gonna have regarding that listing that I'm using.
So it'd probably be best if we checked refrigerated regardless, right? If
Yes.
it's
Well,
refrigerated,
there was a change last year that we put through here in MLS where we added refrigerated yes, no, I think it was, or evaporated refrigerated, and then it's ducted yes, no. Before it was a little more vague, so we cleaned that up last year, so I think it's better now.
Yeah, again, the more information you give us, the better.
Great. Good morning. Thank you very much. Great information. What about a seller that wants to have an appraisal done before we get into the MLS? Thoughts on that?
Everybody in this room is going to have a different opinion on that. And I know so I don't know, I've probably heard thousands of real estate coaches over the year, and it's probably 50-50, you know. Some people think it's the best thing ever. Some people say it doesn't. I think it has a lot to do with the current market conditions too. But correct me if I'm wrong, guys. You guys can answer this. So when you get an appraisal order, you have a purchase agreement, correct? Right? So you're not taking a shot in the dark. Where if you're asking for an appraiser
That's my
up front, they're basically taking a shot in the dark, right? How would you look at that differently?
Which is no different than a estate, you know, a dated death appraisal, private appraisal because a couple's splitting up and they need to figure out. So we do ones without purchase agreements. One thing I always point out whenever I get asked that question is, I want to make sure you understand if you're going to put the house on the market and you don't already have a pre-established agreement that, you know, a friend wants to buy the house, so we're not going to put it in the MLS. You know, they're not going to even talk to you guys as a real estate agent. So just understand, federal lending law requires the lender to hire the appraisal. So if we do the appraisal for you before it gets listed, you put it on the market. If they're not doing a cash sale, there's probably going to be another appraisal that somebody's got to pay for. And I want people to know that up front.
The challenge is a property that is very old in an area where looking for comps are wild. I mean, the comps that come up are thousands, hundreds of $1,000 difference in that property. And so that's a concern from the seller's standpoint.
From all due respect to what these guys do, this is what we do every day, right? I mean, this is what we do. We do CMAs. We're doing the exact same procedure, right? And maybe a seller feels like it carries more weight because they paid $500 for it versus what we charge. So I don't know. It's a business decision.
Okay, thank you.
Because I tell them if they're gonna put the house on the market, if they've got a real estate agent they're gonna use, you're gonna provide that, here's what I'm recommending it be listed for, you're gonna provide that for them without the additional cost. I don't mind taking people's money, I just don't wanna take their money under misconception.
Hi, I'm just wondering, for locations that you don't have a lot of comps, what do you do, how do you, let's say, for example, like Peralta or Bosque Farms, long time ago.
I'm gonna repeat it because I don't think they could hear you back there, but go say it again.
Okay, my question is, if you are in a location where you don't find a lot of comps, what do you do then? Do you widen the search, like distance-wise or time-wise?
Both.
Okay,
So
so
we'll adjust time-wise and look at how the market has changed over time. We'll adjust distance-wise to some extent, because it still needs to be a similar type neighborhood.
so which do you use first, the time first, like maybe adjust the time first and then distance?
Of
It
course, it
depends.
depends, but,
It really does depend.
you know, sometimes the banks, will go, it needs to be within a mile. Well, you look at some of the neighborhoods, and North Albuquerque Acres is all very similar, and it's outside of a mile. So what I don't want to do is, I can be just south of Tanawan by 3 blocks. I'm not going to do stuff that's within a mile, but that's inside Tanawan because it's not similar. So I'll adjust distance-wise first if I have a good area that I can adjust distance-wise.
Exactly what he says. And if I'm doing an area such as Bosque Farms or Peralta, like you were saying, in that case, I'm going to do all of Bosque Farms and Peralta. I'm looking for land that's similar in value. If I've got a house that's got irrigation, I generally want to stick to other properties that have irrigation, not going further east, where it's maybe drier land, there's not irrigation, it's dirt roads occasionally. So first I'll try to expand out a little bit in those type of areas, and then I'll go further back in time.
Okay, last question. So for communities, location, they say this location is not so good location, this location is good. Do you adjust any comps if you use, and what percentage do you adjust?
It depends. It really does. There is no adjustment out there that's gonna be one size fits all. It really just depends on where the house is located, what advantages this lot has over, another one. There's really a lot of factors that go into it, and things that, we're looking at land sales, we're looking at, location if it backs up to the freeway or backs up to a busy through street, things like that. So there's all these different factors that come into play when trying to make a location adjustment, and it's not one size fits all.
So if we have the opportunity to go, okay, in the area where the subject is and in the area where our comp is, it maybe not be the same type location. If I've got vacant land sales in both of them, I can kind of see what the difference is between the two.
Thank you.
Okay, so first off, thanks to the panel for being here today, and thank you for the LEAP committee for putting this on, the volunteers that are part of that committee. Thank you so much for bringing this to us. I have a couple of clarifications for each of you. So one is for living area, why are we accounting for the shed? And because our clients are always asking about what fees and stuff like that. Why is an intermediary required for the appraisers? And then if Tego, if you can explain, when you're putting in documents private versus public?
Do you have, how much time do you have?
I don't know. I can be here the rest of the afternoon.
So why is an intermediary required? They're not. It depends on the lender that they're using. Some of them use AMCs because the AMCs got established when the market crashed and they want, okay. But there are lenders that go direct to the appraisers, and then there is no intermediary fee.
And as far as storage sheds go, if it's permanently affixed to the property, it is now part of that property. So they want to see every view of that property, and that includes inside of the shed. If it's a personal shed that can be moved, taken down, or easily moved without, having to tear up the ground, then in that case, it's considered personal property. So we don't actually need a photo of that. But if it's permanently affixed to the property, it's part of that property, so we have to take a photo of it.
So it can add value to the property.
Yes. It's going to add value to the property.
So if it's like on cinder blocks or something,
If you can put a forklift under it and lift it and take it away, then it's personal property.
Public versus private documents, give you the simple answer. If you check it as a public document, it can be directly shared to your client just within the MLS. If it's marked as private, you have to download it first before you share it to your client. Literally, that's the only difference. It's not actually public.
I wanted to give you a little more background. You guys can speak to the appraiser. I cannot. And so back in the day, I could, and I would call them, and that's kind of where the problem lied. Hey, we're doing this deal, it needs to appraise that. And so that was why this whole rule came forward. So we can't speak to the appraisers. We cannot send the order. We cannot have any contact with them. We cannot tell them, hey, your adjustments were too high, explain it. So even when companies have no AMC, they generally—
They have an independent appraiser department.
They have an independent group that works solely with appraisers, and their pay has no tie to the outcome of that loan. So there are a lot of things in place, whereas instead of having an employee do that, lots of companies go directly to an AMC who can manage the licenses, regulations, all the requirements, and they don't have to worry about that anymore. And that's why a lot of people will use an AMC.
thank you. So it's basically just keeping it separate. Okay, and then thank you to—
Blame Dodd and Frank.
And then so thank you to you for that explanation between private and public, basically saying that we're not just putting the information out there on the
No,
okay.
no. There's one obscure exception, but we can talk about that later. But yes, it's not actually going out public. It's not getting syndicated. It's not in the IDX feed.
I'm sorry, but I have a continuation of question just before about value. I have a property that is overbuilt for the area. It's down south of Las Lunas in Tierra Grande, and there the acreage minimum is 5 acres, and the acreage sells for a lot less than anything around the area. There have been no sales, nothing that compares to this property. It's custom designed, custom built, and so I called another appraiser that is a friend of mine, and she couldn't find anything either. What do I do in the case you can't find anything?
In that case, we're looking at, is the land excess land? Is the land surplus land? Is the home over improved for the market area? Because those are all going to be questions, even if we did an appraisal and send it into a lender, they're going to end up asking us, was that home over improved for that market area? Should they not have built such, a custom improvement for that location? They are going to ask us that question. And here's the ultimate answer. You never want to be the nicest home in a neighborhood or a market area. You never want to be the most expensive, because then that always brings the questions from the underwriter, whoever is reviewing the appraisal. Is this home over improved? And if we can't justify it, if we can't say, well, yes, but there hasn't been a sale in the last 3 years or 4 years, there are other homes similar in size, similar quality, similar land, they just haven't sold in the last few years, chances are we're going to say it's over improved. And so if you're not finding any comps a single one, you might run into an issue where the home is over improved. And I can't say for certain without actually, seeing the property and doing all the data and all that fun stuff. But you start asking that question, especially if you spoke with an appraiser and they said they couldn't find anything either, it does bring the question, is the home over improved?
What do
I
I
mean,
do?
we have we have the same access that you do.
Yeah, I mean,
We can't find anything that you can't find.
it makes it tough, because then in a situation like that, chances are you're going to be looking for a cash buyer, because if we tell the bank that it's over improved, in most cases, I've only come across that a few times in my career, but they wouldn't lend on the property because it was over improved. And pulling comps, if we can't pull comps for it, and I'm having to go outside of the market area, outside of a competing market area, to find comps, I'm going to put in that report that the home is over improved. Yes, I was able to find sales, but the problem with that is it's not giving the most accurate value. It could skew the value either up or down depending on where I'm pulling comps from. So it's tough. We are, like Randy said, we have the same info that you have. And so if we're not able to find it, I may go back to lender and say there is nothing that's supporting this, and I can't just pull a number.
Well, what do I do?
Pick
a number out of this.
I mean, that's the hard part, is if there's no data, I mean, we're not going to come across data that is not available to you either. You know, we could go based off a cost approach and what it costs to build. We could go off of, you know, I mean, sales comparison approach. If there are no sales and no data, I mean, sales comparison approach isn't going to be much help. We could use sales that aren't similar from that market area, or we could go further back in time, but you know, those adjustments are going to start getting up there, and you know, then you ask yourself, are they really comparable to this subject property? And so there's only been a few times in my career where I've said, what do I do? And that would probably be one of those times if I'm coming across a property like that.
And like you said, we can go back and do the cost approach and then depreciate based on
Exactly.
The effective age of the home. And if there's no comparable sales, that's the only option that we have.
Cost approach would be the best effective way to determine.
Do you guys,
No easy answer on that one.
Yes.
do you guys think it is a good practice for a situation like that for the realtor to have you do an appraisal?
Yes and no. Exactly. It depends.
Thanks, Tom.
You know, I mean, we're going to give you the appraised value. We're not going to give you a market value. We're going to give you the appraised value, which can help. But at the same time, we may tell you something that you don't want to hear, as far as the home is over improved and you're going to have to look for a cash buyer. And you may not be ready. The seller may not be ready to hear that it's going to need a cash buyer to buy it.
Thank you.
My question has to do with, so it's a change in zoning. Oh, sorry. Okay. My question has to do with the change in zoning, particularly Albuquerque, so that casitas and ADUs have a different, I want to hear how you guys look at them and value them now, given how you used to value them, where people would remove stoves out of, you know, rented casitas. And do you ever look at, if two are similarly remodeled, would you give the same value per square foot of the main house and the casita? Do you look at them in terms of, here's what a 3-bedroom house goes for, here's what a 1-bedroom comparable to the casita would go for? So I'd just like to hear some of your comments about that.
It depends. No, it really, you have to look at the neighborhood. You have to look, I mean, this is where market extraction comes into play. You're looking at, you know, comparable
You know what?
sales.
Let me just say something. You guys haven't hit on market extraction, and Tom Schroeder is the first person to teach me about market extraction. I think that's a really important concept for everybody to understand. If you can get into it more.
Yeah, so market extraction is taking multiple sales that have similar features but differ in other little features and determining what those features are worth. So let's say we've got 3 houses that are all 1,600 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom homes. This one has a 2-car garage. That one, or the other 2 only have a 1-car garage. That's going to allow us to determine what that 2nd-car garage is worth. So that's market extraction. That's the simplest way to put market extraction. It's not always that easy. It may take 10 sales to determine one adjustment, because especially you go to an area like North Albuquerque Acres or the North Valley, where everything is so different and there's not the exact same across the board. It's determining, and that's why I say we look at 20+ sales to make our adjustments. And we may only put 4 to 5 sales in our report, but I guarantee you we looked at probably 20+ sales for that entire report.
So, with the basement, with the ADU, yes, if they're finished to the same condition, then it will probably carry the same weight per square footage of an adjustment for me. So, you've got 3,000 square foot total living area, but one's got a 2,400 square foot GLA with a 600 square foot either basement or casita. There's going to be a minus on one end and a plus on the other line, and it's going to add up to 0 because they're both 3,000 square foot of living area, which is what the buyer is looking at.
Right, would you count detached at a different valuation though than a basement? Or those divided
No.
houses that some people do? I want to hear what they say.
If it's finished to the same similar quality, then probably being considered the same. But, we've got different areas of town where the basements are completely finished out and are the same area. And you've got other areas of town where the basement is where the mechanicals are and it's unfinished. Those are not carrying the same weight.
And along those lines of finished basements and ADUs and things like that are sunrooms, something we actually haven't talked about. A sunroom has to be fully finished and heated. And finished means there's no exposed stucco, there's no exposed brick or anything like that. The exterior part of the sunroom matches the same quality as the original gross living area. So if it's a stucco home, it can't have, just a basic sunroom exterior. It can't have exposed stucco on the interior. It has to have finished flooring. A permanent heat source is not a plug-in heater or a wood stove. Wood stoves are not considered permanent heat sources. Fireplaces are not considered permanent heat source. Permanent heat source is anything that can keep that living area or that space above 50 degrees without having to be maintained. So that means you're not having to add wood or pellets or anything like that. It doesn't have to be plugged in or unplugged or turned on. It can be turned on. But so it's got to be, if it's a electric baseboard heater, it's got to be hardwired into the system. It can be a mini split unit, stuff like that. But sunrooms are another one that I probably see a lot of where they're included in the square footage and then it's not separated out in the sunroom section of the MLS. So just added onto that.
And in my experience, we used to have people move the stove because we didn't want it to be counted as a 2-unit, because as soon as it's a 2-unit, the interest rate is different, or maybe the qualifications on the program are out. Like MFA would automatically, not at this point, but they might get back to it where they would automatically say, that's out, you can't have a 2-unit. And so that's really why we used to do that.
As far as paid off solar panels in a home, how much value do they add?
Uh-oh. It's gonna go with depends.
A lot, a little?
It depends. I mean, some areas we may see it bring no value. Some areas we may see it bring, 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%. It depends. It really does. I mean, there's no adjustment in any appraisal in any market area that's an across-the-board adjustment that's just, we can say it's the same no matter where we go. It's based on that market area. And within a market area, you may have 10 neighborhoods, and each one of those neighborhoods may be slightly different than the other neighborhood. And so solar may bring something in one neighborhood within that market area where it brings less in another neighborhood.
And why is that?
It's what the market tells us. I can't give you an exact reason. Nothing we do is based off our personal feelings or our own opinions about something. It's based off what the data in that market area tells us. And that's why I say the market extraction comes into play. And I use that on every single appraisal I do.
Because we're seeing buyers in one area that are willing to pay more for the solar in one area than buyers in another area.
Okay, thank you.
It could also be like socioeconomic, this area can't really afford the $500 a month for panels. And so therefore there's less comps with solar and they can't do their market extraction. So it really is gonna depend on area.
I have 2 questions. One should be quick. Is there such thing as a drive-by appraisal anymore?
I have not ordered one and I have no idea how long, so not for me.
Yeah, I've seen requests for doing them.
Occasionally? Okay.
Yeah, I don't like to do them because if they're, it's hard to tell what the condition of the subject is, and so then how can I evaluate it? The most recent one that I had no problem doing is I had done the appraisal for the sale, and 10 months later, they were doing a refi, and they said an exterior only. Okay, I had measured the house. I knew what it looked like inside.
Did you look in the window? Okay.
Yeah, we're on a drive-by, we can't actually go onto the property. It's everything our photos are taken from the street. And so we can't actually go on the property, go in the backyard, things like that. So the liability reasons, I'm not a fan of them either unless I've done a prior appraisal.
And it's hard to say, we're gonna assume that they've maintained the interior of the home the same way they've maintained the exterior of the home. I'm sure you guys have been in homes where that is not true.
Very much. They just used to be very common, so that's why I was curious. So the other, kind of based on some of the previous questions, we have a house in Belen. It's just a really basic 30, 40-year-old house. Some upgrades, but it's just very average, that the house is. But it's on 3 acres, and it has horse facilities now that have been added since they purchased. And so it's really hard to find comps that have that similar size square footage or acreage. So kind of how do you make adjustments for acreage, and then what do you do when how do you determine it's a horse property and what that value?
Real quick, before you answer, I'm so sorry. We're about out of time, so you guys will be our last questioners, and then Tego.
Thanks.
So if I'm in an area like Belen and I'm looking for something that is on similar to 3 acres, what I'm going to first do is look at land sales from Belen, and specifically that market area, especially because you do get into sometimes water rights, irrigation, those types of things. So I want to find land sales because there's been a bunch of land sales down in Belen over the past couple of years. I'm going to try to find land and determine how much, because 1 acre may sell for $30,000, 3 acres may sell for $60,000. I mean, I see that all the time where 1 acre sells more per acre than 3 acres is going to sell. So that's why I want to look at land sales, because I don't want to just assume that, because 1 acre lots are selling for $30,000, that 3 acres is going to sell for $90,000. So look for land sales, look for, a property that is another horse property. It may not be similar in gross living area or even 3 acres, but try to determine and then find another property similar to that. So this is what we do on a daily basis. Find another property that's similar to that, that's on similar acreage. You're looking for all those little things, and then you're going to slowly bracket it down, and that's how you find your value.
It's just hard to find very like-kind properties without doing so many different adjustments.
Find multiple properties that have maybe each of one of those things. Maybe not all of them. May not be a horse property, but it sits on 3 acres. It may not sit on 3 acres, but it's a horse property. It may not be a horse property and sit on 3 acres, but it's similar in size to your house. So look at each one of those things.
Thanks for the thoughts.
Thank you, guys. When you're going through and you're doing your appraisals, what triggers pulling permits, and how do you handle the permitting and unpermitted improvements?
Wow.
So back when I started, it was, I think there was wording that if we couldn't get access to the permits, it had to appear that it was completed in a workmanlike manner and appeared to have been completed with permits. I've seen a lot changed since then. They're stricter now. They really want to see the permits. They want to know that this was permitted. They want to see the tags. That's one thing that we can look for is tags. But if there aren't tags,
So like on the mechanicals?
Yeah, on the mechanical, if there's water heater, electrical, anything like that, I want to see that there's been tags. If the current sellers are the ones that pulled the permits and stuff, hopefully they've kept them. I tell every seller I talk to, always save everything you've ever done to the house. I don't care where you stick, what drawer you stick it in, but save all of it because it will come in handy. And then pass it on to the buyer. So that way they have it because it'll make their life a little bit easier down the road.
The other thing I've done is contact either the county or the city, depending on who would have provided the permits and has set up the zoning. Okay, can it be rebuilt as is? Because sometimes, well, we'll grandfather it in because they did it. We're not going to make them tear it down. But if the house were to burn down, could they rebuild it that way? And if the answer is no, that's going to go into the report because the bank wants to know that, okay, I really can't lend on that.
That is true.
Thank you. Hey, thank you guys for doing the panel. My name is Isaiah Garcia. I'm actually a real estate appraiser as well. I just had a quick question, if maybe you guys could clarify some of the methodologies that we use, like paired sales analysis or regression analysis, and maybe that would help everyone understand, instead of like a, it depends, like for solar panels, what are they worth? It depends on this, it depends on this. Could you maybe touch, you had a slide in your presentation where you had a list of like 4 or 5 methodologies that we use. Could you guys touch on those and maybe that would clarify some of the it depends questions for everybody here?
So, I mean, yeah, so the one I probably go to the most is market extraction, kind of what I explained earlier. That's similar to match paired analysis. You know, you're looking for those things within a neighborhood and a market area that are going to allow you to determine an adjustment. So biggest thing I can say is find homes that are similar to yours. If you're in an area like North Albuquerque Acres or the North Valley where you're not going to find 3 or 4 of the same home, find one of each of the things that you're looking for. So if your house has solar and you're comparing it to other homes that don't have solar, find at least one that has solar. Try to slowly work mathematically and, you know, put the sales next to each other. So I'll try to break this down. Put the sales next to each other. Go, well, this one is larger in size than this one. This one has 3 fireplaces where this one only has 1 fireplace. This one has a 4-car garage. This one has a 3-car garage. So you're trying to bracket each one of those things. So that's when you start getting more and more sales and you say, okay, well, these are where we have the similarities. So this is going to allow you to determine that solar is worth, and you may look at 10 different sales to make that one adjustment for solar, and it may tell you, okay, solar here is worth 3% of, you know, that sales price. That's the easiest way I can probably put it. I know it sounds confusing, and the first 100 times it is, but it starts getting easier the more appraisals you do.
Cool. Thank you.
And Tego had a question?
That was actually my question too, was, you know, how do you determine what a 3 versus a 2-car garage is? How do you determine what a 4-bedroom versus a 3-bedroom? I know the answer, Tom, you told me. But how do you determine what a bathroom is worth, stuff like that? So you kind of basically just addressed it.
Yeah, it's working through 10 plus sales, and I mean that literally. You're gonna look at a lot of different sales and you're gonna think, I'm never gonna figure this adjustment out, or how much I should value for this extra bathroom, or how much I should value for this 4th-car garage versus 3-car garage. But if you start putting all your sales together and you pick out the similarities between each of them and then you determine the differences between them, it'll slowly allow you to work back to that one number that you're originally looking for. And it can be a pain, it can take time, I mean, you're gonna spend hours sometimes, but you slowly start to get to that number and then you're able to say, oh, I know this is worth this much.
Okay. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate the panel and their information and your questions. You can always, email appraisers, you could even call them. I can't, but you could, and they would absolutely answer your questions. So thank you again and have a great day.